1, 2, 3.
While our weekly shows are edited to time for broadcast on public TV and community radio, we offer to you, our members, and podcast subscribers, the full uncut conversation. The following is from our episode, Election 2024 Lies. Money Media Misses the Mark. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to our member supporters. Not a member yet? Go to lauraflanders.org.
Election 2024 is happening in a media environment unlike any other. Local newspapers are closing at a rate of a dozen a month, and the churn in the digital media space is constant. Meanwhile, campaign ads are spreading propaganda and lies that are all too easily infiltrating local reporting. So what is to be done? This month's Meet the BIPOC Press is co-hosted again by Kadia Tubman, disinformation reporter for Scripps News Broadcast Network. Kadia, you must be super busy. But here we're kind of talking not just about disinformation, but misinformation and a media environment that just seems terribly badly equipped to deal with it.
Laura, I'm incredibly busy, yes, for sure, but also very happy to join you again. I just want to set the context for all of us right now. According to a 2024 report from Northwestern University's Local News Initiative, over half of U.S. counties have zero or very limited access to reliable information, whether that's print or broadcast. And when we were talking about digital outlets with all the closings and the layoffs and everything that's going on, that they have even fallen short when it comes to covering local news and marginalized communities. So the question, of course, is where does that leave us? Well, I want us to think about campaign ads that are now flooding into this news vacuum. And that means that's people getting their political information from these ads because they're likely not getting it from a reliable source. And so since August, we know that it's been reported that Republicans have invested over $65 million in anti-trans TV ads alone. And some of those talking points in those ads are actually coming from dubious sources. And so clearly, we need more than ever. We need media literacy tools, and we also need deep reporting from people who are in these communities that are critically impacted by this environment, but also this upcoming election. And thankfully, we have those local and independent and BIPOC media folks who are taking up the lead.
We've got some of those folks with us on the show today. We are joined by Lara Witt. She is the editor-in-chief of Prism and co-founder of the Movement Media Alliance, which is a new coalition of social justice-driven journalism outfits working collaboratively to strengthen their impact. And also with us, a returning guest, Imara Jones, the creator of TransLash Media. Her award-winning podcast, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, just released a new season revealing how most media are entirely missing the relationship between anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ plus propaganda and political violence and efforts to destroy U.S. democracy. It's all connected, and I'm very glad to have you all with us.
Yes, thank you both for being here. Thank you. And we, as Laura just said, we are running up to the election and it's getting close. It's going to be days away. What are you both concerned about right now? I think right now in these kind of settings, we always ask people, what's keeping you up at night? What are you thinking about? But I want to start with you, Imara. What right now is concerning you? What's keeping you up at night?
It's easier to answer what's not keeping me up at night. That's probably much easier. I mean, even the New York Liberty are keeping me up at night right now, so we'll see. I think that one of the things that is keeping me up at night is this lack of understanding about the intersection between anti-trans disinformation, political violence, and paramilitary groups. And the way in which that is being congealed to help undermine democracy. I think that, Laura framed it all very well at the beginning. That is keeping me up at night. And it's keeping me up at night because in these last 2 weeks, this combination of these ads that are being dropped, not only by Donald Trump, but also in Senate races across the country, where they are beginning to show some bite, such as in Tammy Baldwin's race in Wisconsin, as well as the continued incorporation and focus on anti-trans rhetoric in Trump's speeches, to where he is indicating that among the groups that would be purged on day one would be trans people, mean to me that I'm worried about what's being teed up for right after the election. I know that these groups very much see Donald Trump as their avatar, and they listen to what he says. They are in many ways in league with him, and quite frankly, vice versa. And so the fact that this is beginning to be a key part of the closing argument and has been such an instigator for recruitment and violent demonstrations of force that they have engaged in since January 6th, all have me very concerned about what happens after November 5th, because I think that we would all be shocked if we go to bed on November 5th knowing who the president of the United States is. And that's where things can jump off.
Same question to you, Lara. What's keeping you up?
So much, primarily genocide, an expansion of genocide into southern Lebanon, and a Democratic Party that seems intent on catering primarily to the right and to centrists. The Kamala Harris's campaign has done very little to address anything that affects LGBTQIA plus folks in the US. They seem intent on shaping policy very much in collaboration with Republicans that they have stated are a dire threat to our democracy. And what we're observing here at Prism is that the folks who are doing the most work on the ground to make the connections between genocide and anti-trans legislation in the US, as well as white supremacy and white supremacist movements in the US, aren't being courted by the Democrats. They're actually being ignored. And folks very much on the left and in movement spaces are doing their best to organize despite all of this, and will continue to organize after the election too.
We're going to hear more from you on that in just a bit. Coming back to you, Imara, Kadia mentioned how much money the Republican side has been putting into anti-trans ads. I think it's a new talking point from Trump, is it? Kamala is for they, them. Trump is for you. I mean, is this stuff working? Is it a sign of desperation? You mentioned Tammy Baldwin, one of the first out members of our Senate. What do you think is actually playing out at the polls?
Well, I think the thing that constantly understand about the way that anti-trans issues have been teed up and are seen by the Republican Party is not as majority vote getters, right? They're designed to be marginal vote getters. And they're the type of issues that help you when the race is really close. I mean, they're designed to get, 1 to 2 votes per precinct. But that was Donald Trump's margin of victory in Michigan last time, right? In 2016. So these issues aren't designed to get you large amounts of votes. They're designed to help you eke out narrow elections, which is why this presidential election is so ripe for this type of issue, because it's the exact type of election that this issue is designed to work in. And it says something to me that the polls that say that Donald Trump is surging are not accurate, because they're not acting like a campaign that sees itself as such. If they were surging, they wouldn't need to drop all this money and to put all of this energy into a marginal vote getter. It's because they see the election as either extremely close with either one of them barely ahead. And so they're deploying this in a big way in order to try to sort of pull it out. And I think that one of the indications to me, I was actually going back and forth with someone in Texas about this, is that they were saying, oh, well, we just had a state legislative race where this issue was tried out, and we had someone who's LGBTQ win, despite the fact that, they were attacked on these issues. But that's because there was a pretty good margin in that race, right? I think that the fact that I see, Representative Allred having to issue an ad, a bad ad, I should have to say, if you care about trans people and trans rights, but issuing an ad that he felt was something that he needed to respond to because of what they had put out, it tells me that they're sensing that there's some movement on this. And I think the fact that you see this in other Senate races means that these races are very tight, 10,000, 20,000 votes apart. And this is exactly the type of issue that anti-trans rhetoric is designed to help you win.
Thank you. When we're thinking about such a tight election, it seems like there is an era of desperation that we're getting to right now. That if you're trying to get those minimal votes that can take you over, you're going to throw whatever you can at the wall. I'm interested in, Lara, from the work that you're doing in terms of meeting this moment, especially in talking about Israel and Palestine and trying to move that to the forefront. Do you see those issues being as presented up and down the ballot as we are hearing about trans issues?
No, mostly because a lot of the framing around Palestine has been fully in support of Israel. There might be like a small caveat of we are saddened by the humanitarian crisis. It's not a humanitarian crisis, it's a genocide. But ultimately, the Democrats are not scared of losing votes from the progressives. They don't seem to even care about them. They're just shifting right entirely. They're courting Republicans who might be disenchanted by Trump, who don't want to work with someone who's unwieldy as him. They're very much courting like old school Republicans rather than caring about the deep issues that are affecting our communities, whether they are Arab American communities in the US, immigrants, Black and brown folks all throughout the US, Indigenous people. It's not about us for them. But we are deeply, deeply invested in covering the issues that are affecting us, less so the political theater and the tug of war that's happening, and more so how all of these policies are affecting us day in and day out, and providing the context for each of those policies so that people can make informed decisions, be it at the ballot box or in their day-to-day organizing.
We're going to talk about media in this conversation, and I want to come back to that question, Imara. Both you and Lara are talking about stories that are in the news, events that happen, but there's something being missed in the coverage, and that you really distilled it in the episode of your season 3 of the anti-trans hate machine that talked about there's no such thing as a lone wolf, and the relationship between propaganda and ginning up an atmosphere and actual real life against human beings violence. What are press missing?
Everything. From the fact that, for instance, there's not one single trans analyst or contributor on any of the cable networks, even though, our issues are front and center, trans issues are front and center as a political issue, as a mainstream political issue, not as a marginal political issue. From that to the fact that these issues are covered by mainstream newsrooms or seen as mainstream newsrooms as last year's issue, right? We already covered anti-trans legislation, so why do we need to keep talking about it? So there's a belief that it's nothing new. As we reported last year, another thing that mainstream newsrooms are missing is the fact that they have begun to absorb and to launder these ideas. A really great example of that is what's happened in the New York Times. And the fourth is just to completely ignore the fact that anti-trans rhetoric and the focus on trans people is an instigator and motivator for some of the most violent paramilitary groups in the country that have deep ties to political parties in the United States, namely the GOP. So I think that there's so much that's actually sort of being missed by media that is actually just solid, good reporting. I think that the reason why is that there is a fear, and this issue has been so successfully framed that if you do anything that is not both sidesism, it's deemed to be portrayed as that you're not actually doing your job as a journalist. And what that means is that you actually are missing the main story. And to go to this particular issue around the lack of lone wolves, as it were, that's a really important one, because what it means is that we may be missing the mark on political violence in America, when we have various shootings that are seen as lone wolves, when we have violent incidents such as the attempt to burn down churches be reported as lone wolves, when the very phrase lone wolf was created by the white supremacist movement in the 1980s to mask the fact that they were using and weaponizing culture at the time in order to spur individuals to commit violent acts, which they thought would then create a white supremacist uprising in the United States. And they're very much still operating under that principle now. So, and it's just become more sophisticated, such as online gaming, which is being used to recruit and desensitize young men to white supremacists and other forms of violence, including gender-based violence. And so there's so much that's being missed. And what I fear is that us missing it actually takes us closer to some of the worst things happening.
Lara, what are you doing on the same front in terms of correcting the media bias or filling a gap, righting a wrong in the media coverage there at the Alliance, which is a very exciting new development?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since we're all aligned under the umbrella of movement journalism, which is journalism in the service of social, political, and economic transformation, what we're doing is ensuring that the issues that we're discussing are not framing this idea of both sidesism or even objectivity as the ruling factor in our coverage. It isn't. We very much are invested in ensuring that our communities are safe, that folk can live their lives as fully autonomous beings. And mainstream media often just misses that or doesn't care because they're either not staffed by diverse folks and have continued to actually just shelve a lot of their verticals that were dedicated towards LGBTQIA+ and BIPOC in the US. I mean, we've seen, especially this year, the only time that I really received a lot of news or information from mainstream media sources about anything affecting trans or Black and Brown communities in the US was during Pride Month. And that was it. It's really, really disheartening to see how little they care, but also how scared they are and how they seem to be courting, similar to the Democratic Party, seem to be courting a more conservative or centrist audience by just ignoring huge swaths of the population who deserve to understand, one, what's happening within our own communities, but who need all the information available in order to make informed decisions and to protect themselves and each other.
Lara, you mentioned just now that news organizations might be scared and that they're moving in a sense of fear about saying the wrong thing or having to include both sides when they are reporting on a story. I'm curious from both of you, Imara and Lara, when you are thinking about the work that your organization does, and it's from the place I'm standing from, it seems like it's moving from a place of not fear. If you can give us some examples, some models of what you're doing to meet this moment, whether that's for you, Imara, making sure to illuminate how much far-right and authoritarian movement is expanding from legislatures to the streets, or for you, Lara, moving towards this group of movement journalism and making sure that there's communities and focus beyond elections. How are you both, in examples, pure examples, meeting this moment?
Yeah, I mean, for the Movement Media Alliance, it's really ensuring that our publications, each of our organizations, can be sustainable. So it's going to look like fundraising together, ensuring that we have the funding available to continue doing what we're doing, not year to year, but with 5 years of planning and dreaming and strategizing together. Being able to provide a sense of security, whether it's via tech or whether it's via editorial collaborations, like with Communities Beyond Elections, which I can go to a little bit further too. We need to provide support systems for each other, because a lot of right-wing media and a lot of mainstream media is actually very, very well funded, but left-wing and movement journalism is actually very poor and very underfunded. And so it means that there are less opportunities available to journalists and editors who are movement oriented, who are BIPOC, who are LGBTQIA+ folks, and in order to ensure that we are bringing in more journalists from our communities, it means being able to provide the opportunities. It means being able to provide really good pay and pensions and insurance and benefits and parental leave, all the things that all people deserve, but that marginalized people have even less access to. So that's really one of the overall goals for movement journalism and for the Movement Media Alliance in particular. And that shows through the coverage that you do. It really does. We can't do precise and rigorous journalism without the support structures to ensure that each of our publications survives and thrives.
Imara, what does that precision look like for you?
I mean, I think that it means us telling people in as many ways as we possibly can what's going on in as frank and clear way as we possibly can. I think that for me and everyone else at TransLash, every time we move into a topic, we move in with a serious amount of skepticism, right? We don't move in with the idea that we understand what's happening or why. We move in with a large degree of questioning. And I think that that's one of the reasons why some of the things that we do are have gotten attention, is because I think that we're able to convey our own surprise or the things that we've discovered, because we're not going in with a set of things that we are assuming are happening. I know that was very much my experience with this season of Anti-Trans Hate Machine. I came away astounded at what I learned after spending more than a year with paramilitary and political violence in America, to be perfectly honest. And I think that it's our jobs to dial up the volume as much as possible. And I think that that's what we're doing. And so that's why we're saying things in podcast, and we are creating animated films, and we're doing TikTok explainer videos, and we are, putting out additional resources for journalists in terms of infographics and transcripts and other things, just really trying to do as much as we can to dial up the volume of what's happening. The megaphones may not be as large, but that doesn't abdicate our responsibility to continue to do our jobs. I think one of the things that keeps me up at night, sparked by a question that was asked at the top, which is my fear is that it's not enough.
Yeah.
That's actually my fear. My fear is that, a month from now, 6 weeks from now, 2 months from now, something grave would have happened that was either forecast or alluded to in our work, that if it had been taken seriously or heard by a larger people, may have been avoidable. And that is something that I think about often right now.
Yeah, I'm haunted by the story that we did from North Carolina about how saboteurs, in the context of a ginned up anti-trans, anti-drag campaign, fired on 2 energy substations and took out power to 40,000 people, homes and businesses. This stuff is very real.
The conversation continues, but first, some news for you from Laura Flanders and friends.
Hi, lovely listeners. I'm Laura, and I want to personally share with you some of the episodes we've been percolating here for the next few weeks at Laura Flanders and Friends. Right after the election, we will have some of our favorite movement leaders convened for a roundtable discussion. Straddling the election week of November 5th, we'll be talking about the possibilities of another post-election insurrection with the people behind a very sobering film called War Game. Laura Flanders and Friends is, as we say, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a backseat to the people who are doing it. Our guests are doing it. Now we just want to thank you, our member supporters, for doing your part. All of you who have yet to become members, please do it. Join our community today by making a one-time donation or make it monthly at lauraflanders.org/donate. That's lauraflanders.org/donate. Thank you.
Now back to our full uncut conversation from our episode Election 2024 Lies. Money Media Misses the Mark.
One of the key questions you went into this season with, Imara, was where are these anti-trans laws coming from? You focused on Idaho, a place that didn't have a whole lot of trans people in sports, but decided that they had to ban that as a priority, but they got a lot of outside help. Can you talk a bit more about what you found when you dug and did basic journalism?
Well, I think that the thing that's really interesting about Idaho is how it's a kind of a petri dish for how you combine a variety of sources and resources within sort of the Christian nationalist and extreme political movement on the right to destabilize communities and to elect even more extreme politicians, because you're creating a feeling of intimidation, an air of intimidation across the state. And so one of the things that we found was the role of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, which sounds like it's an innocuous kind of think tank, but really acts as the connective tissue between paramilitary groups and local politicians, and leveraging places like libs of TikTok to help spread the word and to help create flashpoints in the state for this type of intimidation. And what that's designed to do is to actually get people who are middle of the road, or people who are just everyday people, because Idaho is still a conservative state, but to get them to retreat from public life, to not run for office, to not make their voices heard, to not show up at political meetings of any sort, like school boards and the rest. And what that's doing is that it is actually pushing the politics of the state to more extreme levels in terms of the politicians that are getting elected, and the types of laws that they are putting forth. So one of the laws that is supported by the Idaho Freedom Foundation is to legalize paramilitary groups in the state. And so I think that we have to understand the ways in which, rather than seeing these various points of extremism as separate, that they're actually learning how to work together in concert in order to bring about an extreme politics, an authoritarian politic in America. And I think that we are vastly behind reporting and understanding that story.
And it's great that you keep illuminating that this is not just a singular situation. This is actually a concerted effort. This is a group. This is a movement. And that just also brings me to the other side of it. That's fighting against it. Lara, when we think about, you just talked earlier about movement journalism, and you have more, of course, to tell us about the work that you do with the Movement Media Alliance. But I think we want to know more about that, of course. Like, who's a part of this alliance, and what have you learned so far about these groups coming together to really push a movement forward towards social, political, and economic transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of journalistic intermediaries where their goal is to sell a product or do a thing with the goal of helping journalists and newsrooms. They receive funding from large foundations that might not want to fund journalism directly, might not want to fund newsrooms directly, but they're happy to fund a product or a thing that is usually tech-oriented or has a solution to help newsrooms in the US. But often what these intermediaries do is basically soak up the funding that a lot of nonprofit and independent newsrooms really, really need. So this is one of the many reasons for why the Movement Media Alliance came together. But beyond just that funding aspect of things, it was also because we wanted to be together in a space with people with a similar political grounding. It's not enough to just be, centered around representational politics. That can be a little bit flimsy and difficult if you don't have like a very solid grounding in a politic that is moral and that is just. So really having this like justice and liberation oriented principle through journalism is one of the greatest ways for us to come together, because we can support each other in so many different ways. So not just in structural and organizational support or financial support, but also via editorial collaborations, which are just a really wonderful way for so many newsrooms with so many different kinds of coverage, so many different media that they work through, be it podcasting or video, or long form features, investigations, everyday reported news. This diversity in our kinds of coverage is really, really great, because what we at Prism are not able to do, another outlet is able to do. And so we can work together to produce something that can reach a greater audience, that brings movement journalism to more people who really need it, who have stopped trusting mainstream journalism for a very long time and for very good reason, but they've turned to non-fact check sources, primarily through social media, most likely through TikTok or YouTube videos that are not vetted, that often are proliferating really, really dubious sources, and just, well, a lot of the time anti-trans and very racist rhetoric that just turns into what we are currently experiencing. But movement journalism can be that solution that a lot of folks are looking for. If they can't trust mainstream media, they can trust us. You know, our journalism is exceptionally rigorous. It is very, very fact-checked, but it's coming from the communities who are most affected by the issues that are happening within this country.
Right. While we're so excited about Movement Media Alliance, I have to also point out, Lara, that you wrote an editorial recently about a legislative initiative that could really pose a real threat to some of your members. And I should say your members include most of the outlets that we have had on this feature of Meet the BIPOC Press for the last 3 years. This is an initiative I 100% support, and we're singing your song on the experience of fundraising. But this could all be seriously threatened by legislation.
Absolutely. That piece was co-written with Negin, the editor-in-chief at Truth Out. She did such wonderful reporting for that piece. We are very, very threatened by that kind of legislation, obviously.
Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So this piece of legislation would essentially limit and harm organizations that are openly pro-Palestinian. So not only could it actually harm organizations that are doing more direct support for Palestine and for Gaza and the West Bank, but it could also affect newsrooms that are accurately reporting on what is happening within Palestine. So any newsroom that is within the Movement Media Alliance, but also any newsroom that isn't a part of it who has actually taken a stance.
Well, that comes back to where we began, Kadia. And Imara, I'd love you as well as Laura to weigh in on this. We started by saying, there's a lot of people that are saying the lack of mainstream media is a campaign issue in this election. We've lost legacy papers all across the country for years. I think we'll have a third fewer of them by the end of this year than we started 20 years ago with. I'm always a little skeptical of that because most of those papers didn't cover the stories that you are talking about today anyway. So as much as there's a decline and we're sad and sometimes it's a real loss, there's often a real opportunity and people like yourselves are jumping into it. But this election, how much blame can you put simply on the lack of reporting institutions? And how much is it just poor journalism and ideological or capitalist bias? Imara.
That's a brilliant question. I think one, it's a failure of reporting and of the way that these institutions are set up, point blank. That's the first thing I think I would say. But it's related to I wouldn't say the decline of the existing institutions, but I would say it's related to the lack of institutions which serve a vast majority of Americans, especially those traditionally left out of conversations with the news information and media resources that they need. Because one of the things that we know is that mainstream media is highly responsive to and impacted by what they see as other outlets covering and what seems to be emerging journalistically. And if there were more outlets that spoke to the full range of Americans and America, because we have to realize that mainstream journalism was never designed for everyone, right? Like that's a part of its demise, is that it actually wasn't designed to speak to everyone. And as the demographics of the country shift, then it makes sense that the institutions that are speaking to, every year, a smaller and smaller group of people are going to fall by the wayside. Like that's just a natural consequence of what's happening. But if we had more institutions that were able to speak to this group of people and to show that there was a response to what they were doing, it actually would act as a catalyst for mainstream journalism to change how they cover and to expand their coverage and to dig deeper. Whereas, the Christian nationalist movement and the right wing, they've invested an incredible amount of money in developing an alternative media infrastructure and an alternative journalistic infrastructure, not only in Fox News, but in almost every way and platform imaginable. And what that's done is, because that has now become such a large microphone, it's actually pushing mainstream outlets into a more conservative direction. And there's nothing that is designed to be responsive to that. And so I think that the two are tied together, but I really think that a lot of it is the failure of these institutions. I mean, I can't get over the fact, for example, that more outlets are not reporting on these anti-trans ads, and the way that this is a part of the major closing argument for the Trump campaign in the last two weeks, because this is not an underground campaign. It's not subtle. It's not something that they're trying to hide. It's a major, major push. And why it hasn't received the attention that it deserves astounds me.
Lara, you want to be, I don't know, ambitious? Is the Alliance capable of being that alternative that Imara just talked about, of filling that need? I have to say, there have been initiatives, with all due respect, like yours before. I've been part of many of them. It's always been incredibly hard, but good on you. Go for it. Could you be that alternative voice and change this dynamic?
It's worth trying.
For sure.
It always is. I think that the Movement Media Alliance can be different than other forms of journalistic alliances, mostly because a lot of journalistic alliances have not had a political grounding, and they haven't actually been rooted in movement journalism. It does feel different this time around. And so many of the people who are a part of this are either deeply experienced within movement journalism or journalism itself, or labor organizing, or just, have different walks of life that are coming together and have different experiences that they bring to the table. A lot of the journalistic associations that I'm familiar with, or that I've been a part of, have actually been pretty deeply entrenched with the same people who have been trying the same things, who, didn't think that social media was going to put a dent in journalism, who thought that pivoting to video solely was just going to win them Facebook. It didn't. Who just couldn't, did not keep their fingers on the pulse of what people wanted out of their journalism and what they wanted out of media. And that was their failure. But it was also this myopic view of what politics is, and also what people needed in the moment, and the fact that they couldn't even put a dent in the mythology of American exceptionalism, the mythos that has allowed them to continue this settler colonial entity without any sort of critical analysis, without looking at the systems of oppression that create the nation that we exist in. And so, of course, people don't necessarily know or understand the things that are happening around them. And that's a failure, not just of journalism, but of our educational system, of our political system. All of these things, like we said at the beginning, are deeply connected, and media just plays one part of it. And it's our responsibility to do everything that we possibly can.
Lara, can I just jump in? I think two things occur to me about both of your comments. I think, first of all, one of the most fascinating things to me is, a really good example of one of the, big idea initiatives that happened that you'll be very familiar with is, of course, Air America, right? And that particular project. And after a while, some of the people that backed it said, well, we've dumped, how many tens of millions of dollars into this initiative, and it hasn't gone anywhere. Meanwhile, the Fox News was losing essentially billions of dollars for more than a decade before it took hold. And one of the things that's missing is the patience and the focus of people who write the checks to be able to create what's needed, right? We all know that media is expensive. Why? Because it is a labor-intensive industry that competes with profit-making institutions for talent. That means that it's going to be costly. And so if you're going to get into this particular line of work and backing it, it's going to require resourcing and patience. And we just haven't seen that take place. And I think that that's why these initiatives haven't taken flight. And that is a conversation that, I think is beyond the reach of all of the people in this conversation right now, because it means talking to people who need to be engaged in that. The second thing that I would say that's really important that I was just sparked is that, you know, there's a lot of conversation, for example, about Black men and how Black men, you know, seem to be, you know, not focused or gravitating towards Trump. And I mean, what is the media outlet? What is the journalistic outlet that is focused on engaging Black men in a serious conversation about their news and information needs and is designed to meet that? And so is it any wonder that there is an entire group of Americans who, you know, as you just said, like, don't know what's going on. It's hard to figure out. The American system is designed to be complicated from the beginning. It's designed for people to not completely understand what's going on. It's designed to be opaque. And in order to crack that code, you need to have informed people as the checks and the guardians for democracy. That's why journalism is the only profession that's written in the Constitution, and because it is an essential part of democracy. And so if we have large amounts of the population that are not addressed and spoken to and have their needs met from a journalistic and information standpoint so that they could be really powerful citizens, is it any wonder that we are at the precipice, possibly, sadly, that we've been on for 9 years, of walking on the edge of authoritarianism? It doesn't seem to me to be that big of a wonder.
Especially when we're thinking about the long walk that got us here. Both of you have mentioned what it meant to stay the course, organizations and newsrooms that actually have had the precision that we're all talking about, that we've been talking about, but have stayed with it and kept it, passing the time of social media, passing the time of video, all of that to get to where we are now, to where an audience can look for TransLash and for an audience to look for movement journalism. It makes me think of something Kerry Washington, who's been, you know, out there on the Media Blitz tour, said recently. She's like, everything's getting canceled so soon. And she was talking about TV, but I was thinking about also newsrooms. Newsrooms are getting cut off so soon before they can even show proper reporting that we actually need right now. And what that made me think of when I think of both of you right now is what it means to go into the future. What will stay with us? As a person who reports on disinformation, I've constantly seen and have been able to confirm that the long-standing, especially those not so fact-checked sources of news, are the ones that are staying behind. They're the ones that are lasting. If you have the vice president, a candidate for president, going on something like I'm not going to say the shows, but she's going on certain shows that have been called out as venues for far right and also disinformation. But that's because these mediums have stayed around. These groups have stayed around, and so that is something that I also want to point out from a disinformation perspective, but also why it's so incredibly important for the work that you're all doing, for the longevity. I'm sure that it will hopefully stay. But to that point, I mean, Lara, I want to start with you. And then, of course, I want to ask you, Imara, what's next? But communities beyond elections, because we have to look beyond 2024 at some point. But can you tell us a little bit about that and also what you're looking forward to after what happens in November?
Yeah. So we came up with this project idea, or a collaborative idea, during our last convening in June, where we would ensure that we were working together to provide people with information and coverage beyond the election. A lot of people, particularly Americans, see their only political activity as simply voting, just once every 4 years or maybe every 2 years, and then that's it. They don't have any other political engagement, and that's what leads us to a lot of what we're seeing now. And that's not alone their fault. We've touched on why. We want to be able to bring people in the in-between years, and that means giving them the information necessary in order for them to drive them into political action, to see community organizing, to see their participation in whether it's local politics or community organizing as not just something that's for someone else to do, but something that necessitates them, that could be entirely life-changing, that could really connect them to people that they never thought they'd be connected to. And the only way that we can really do that and drive that change is by doing really, really wonderful reporting of what is happening within our communities, especially marginalized communities. We will be presenting things like solutions journalism, hopefully some investigative journalism, which requires a little bit more intensive labor, obviously. But we want to be able to give people hope no matter what, because that's what they need in order to continue working with each other and to actually have the momentum to keep going and to actually create really sustainable change for themselves, for their friends and families and communities beyond them.
Lara, what's next? I mean, we're all entrenched by this latest season, but when we're thinking about post 2024, what is on your radar?
What kind of country we're gonna have? I think that one of the things that we need to prepare for is that we're in for a rough patch, regardless of who is elected, especially when it comes to disinformation and misinformation. What do I mean by that? If Donald Trump ascends to the White House, and there are lots of ways that could happen through as has happened in the past in American history, votes or courts, or there's so many different ways to ascend to the presidency. But if Donald Trump is in the White House, we will have a person who is wedded to disinformation in a more extreme way than in the past be in the White House. And what is that going to do? Who is that going to motivate? And who is that going to motivate when we've been told that there will be no checks, the gloves are off, that the military can be used to deploy against people who are deemed to be undesirable, that there could be purges, right? And there are lots of ways to make that happen. And you can make that happen through what you say, especially when you're in the White House. The second thing is that I think that if Senator Harris becomes president, I think that the disinformation ecosystem and infrastructure that has been created and fomented, that various sites on social media and the like will go into overdrive. I think that what we saw in the era of Barack Obama would pale in comparison to what we would see with a Black and South Asian woman as president of the United States. And so I think that we have to prepare ourselves that what we are normally used to, which is, the Sturmendrang of the election, followed by the soothing balm of the inauguration, followed by boring conversations around policy and the State of the Union, that may not be the way it goes next year. And I think that we have to be very aware of that and to prepare ourselves, especially as journalists, for what that's going to mean for us moving forward.
Thank you, Imara. Thank you, Lara. Kadia, as always, for people who are interested in this question of could we see another January 6th style uprising and what if it was worse? Check out our next episode of this program coming up. But all of you, thank you for your work. It's super important. And thank you, Imara, for remembering that Air America Progressive Radio Center Democrat Radio Initiative. 3 years the investors gave that project. 3 years. And as you say, Fox, Rush Limbaugh, they were given, well, in some cases, decades.
That's right.
We wish you luck, Lara, and everybody part of the Alliance. And Kadia, thank you once again for being here. This is the rough patch, and I'm not sure there are any in-between years, but it feels better when you have pals. So thanks for being a friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the full conversation from our episode Election 2024 Lies. Money Media Misses the Mark. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to you, our member supporters. Please join our members now by making a one-time donation or make it monthly. All the information is at lauraflanders.org. And for information on this conversation, the episode notes are posted at patreon.com/Lara Flanders and Friends, or simply search Lara Flanders. Thanks again to all our member supporters.